This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
I think I just won my taxes.
Yeah?
I just switched to H&R Block in about 1 minute. All I had to do was drag and drop last year's return into H&R Block, and bam, my information is automatically there.
So I don't have to go digging around for all my old papers to switch?
Nope.
Sounds like we just leveled up our tax game.
Switching to H&R Block is easy. Just drag and drop your last return. It's better with Block.
It was really hard for me, and it made me angry at my mom again because she kept this from me. And all the stories they told me about Kelly and Carrie growing up and how amazing they were at softball and this and that. And I'm not one that loves to talk about everything I did well. I wanted to be like, you should have seen me play.
Yeah.
You would have been so proud of me. It wasn't a time when everything was videotaped and on camera when I played. So he will never see me play. He will never know that side of me, which makes me sad because that was his life.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that delves into the world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. In July 2021, my life took a surprising turn when I found out that I'm an NPE, a person who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. Join me as we explore the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. Get ready to unravel the astonishing journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. If you're listening to this episode and you've had a DNA surprise, you might be tuning in from the perspective of someone who just uncovered their results. Or maybe your surprise happened years ago when consumer DNA tests became popular. What has changed for you since the day you opened your test results? In this week's episode, I'm joined by a guest from season 1, Crystal. Crystal had her DNA surprise the same month and year that I did. When we first spoke, it had only been a few months since she received her results, and so much has happened since then. Crystal shares what it was like when she finally met her biological father for the first time, as well as how her relationships have evolved over the years. If you're in the thick of your DNA surprise right now, I hope this episode gives you hope that things will get better, because they will. Thank you, Crystal, for sharing your story. If you haven't heard Crystal's episode yet, I've included a link in the show notes. Go listen to her episode and then come back here for an update. Today, I am joined by Crystal. Crystal was one of my first guests on DNA Surprises in season 1. You may be familiar with her story. It aired in January of 2022. So much has happened since then, and I'm so excited to have a chance to catch up. So welcome, Crystal.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you again.
It is now July, so it has been 2.5 years since we spoke, and I know that your DNA surprise was also in July of 2021, just like mine.
It was.
So have you had your anniversary yet? Is it coming up, and how are you doing?
It's July 29th. I don't really do anything for it. I do notice it on the calendar every year because that will forever be ingrained in my head, that date. This will be year 3. Knowing this new, it's a whole new identity, really, is what it is. But it just so much has changed since I talked to you last.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. So
I need to fill you in.
let's catch up. So how are things going? Last time we talked, you hadn't yet met your bio dad, but you were about to go out to visit him. I think it was like within a month from when we talked, you were going to head out and see him. So have you met your bio dad, and how is that relationship going?
Yes. So I found out July 29th of 2021. We scheduled to go out there October of 2021. So just a couple months after finding out the news, the night before we left, I got COVID, had to cancel literally at 10:30 p.m. the night before. So we canceled that. And then we made a plan to go back in December of 2021. So a couple months after, and we spoke in October 2021.
That's right. Yes.
So that's as far as we got. So yes, me and my husband and 3 kids, we all flew out to Minnesota on December 26th of 2021. Actually, it was Christmas Day. It was December 25th, but we got there late. And where my biological dad lives is literally in the middle of nowhere. It's a 2.5-hour drive from any main airport. Minnesota's very, very cold at the end of December.
Yeah.
So we landed, rented a car. Our flight was delayed, so we didn't get there till, I want to say, 1:30 in the morning. I stayed in this teeny little it's called a microtel, and that's the closest place to where they live. Got there the morning of December 26th with the plans of being at their house at 8 a.m. that day. So I did not sleep very much that night, of course. Plus, I didn't even have that much time to sleep because we got in so late. And I just couldn't sleep regardless. Got up to my alarm, woke everybody up. We ate breakfast and hopped in the car. And they were about a 15-minute drive to their house. And to tell you the truth, I was not at that point on the drive over. I didn't have those butterflies anymore. I felt just ready to meet him. We walked to the front door and I didn't know what was going to happen. I kind of envisioned like this big embracing hug. And his wife answered the door, his wife, Mary, and she gave us all hugs. My new half-sister, Kelly, she was also staying there. She was 31 at the time. She came down the stairs, gave us hugs. But at the whole time, I'm like, the person I'm looking forward to meeting the most is my actual biological father. So I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Like, great, I'll give you guys hugs. But I want to know, like, I want a hug from him. I wanted him. I don't know. I don't know what I pictured in my head. I pictured that, like a Hallmark movie, like
sure,
my long daughter,
hug and
right.
Yeah.
And so he came walking in like the entry room, and he said, "A tall girl." That's all. That's what he said. That's all he said. So I was like, okay. Then I walked over to him, and it was like a hug, like a acquaintance would give an acquaintance hug.
Mm.
So it wasn't, I don't know. I expected a lot more in that moment, and it wasn't there. So I was like, okay. And then Mary, his wife, said, okay, let's eat. So we just walked in like we were just neighbors walking in to eat dinner with them, or breakfast, I guess I should say.
What were you thinking at that point? It's kind of not what you anticipated, and it was awkward. Yeah.
But I don't know what is normal. There's no normal. There's no normal. It was just awkward. And there's 2 new half-sisters. Kelly is the youngest one. She was 31 at the time. And her older sister, who was younger than me still, she was 33. She was also going to be there with her husband and her 2 kids. But 2 days before we got on the airplane to go visit, she texted me and said, we got free tickets to the Vikings game, so we're not going to be able to make it. And I'd never met her before. She was the one that didn't really warm up to me. That had always been.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, was she the older one who was a little bit cooler?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So she canceled on meeting us, but her kids were there. So Carrie was not there. Kelly, the younger one, was there.
Okay. Did your kids all get along?
Yeah, they did. The kids got along great. We all ate dinner together. There was just a lot going on. I noticed my biological dad, Jeff is his name, he kept looking at me. So I would look at him and like kind of smile, and then he would look away right away. It was just kind of an awkward interaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then Kelly, this half sister, and Mary just told a whole lot of stories at breakfast, like about Kelly's softball days. And then Jeff would talk about like how amazing Kelly was at softball. And I felt like nobody asked me any questions about me, and they didn't know that much about me at the time. So I don't know. I just felt kind of put off by it, and I didn't want to know anything else about. I mean, I felt like I knew about everybody in the town after that breakfast. Okay. And I was like, I don't care about these people. I'm never going to remember. Mm-hmm. After breakfast, Mary took all these Christmas cards off her fridge door and was like, oh, these people, you're all related to these people. This is John, Jim, this is Holly. This is like all these names of people I will never remember. These are your cousins. These are your, just like I'm cramming for a test.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just kind of zoned out after a while because it was a lot of information thrown at me. It was mentally just a lot of stuff. Too many people around. Like the kids were distracting. And like I really just wanted a one-on-one time with my biological dad.
Did you get that at any point?
He would pull my husband into the living room and talk to him. So I was like, is he gonna ever talk to me? Like, it was just like I say, awkward. At one point, I went down to the basement with him, and it was quiet down there. Nobody was down there yet. And he is a big hunter. Like, he was a PE teacher and a farmer and a huge hunter and fisherman. He has a big safe filled with guns. And he pulled this rifle out of the safe, and he's like, let's see if this is a good size rifle for you. And like, that was I think him reaching out and wanting to bond with me, which I did not grow up hunting.
Okay.
It was fine. I actually thought it was cute because that's his thing. So, and that's what he did with his daughters.
Yeah. So he was trying to pull you in, like you were saying.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I thought it was really cute. So I was like, oh, this is him like having quality time. And he's like, yep, that's a good size for you. And he's just wanting me to hold this rifle in their living room. So it was funny. And I'll always remember that. That was because that was special to him.
Yeah.
That was the first day I met him. And we left. We stayed at our microtel. We came back 3 other days. It was just like I said, a lot of people around. I didn't get a lot of one-on-one time like I kind of had hoped for. He also, I know I had mentioned before that he had dementia, and he's very hard of hearing. So it was difficult for him to hear when kids were in the background, especially, which is why I kind of wished like the kids hadn't been, not that they hadn't been there, but I just wanted a place where it was quiet so I could have talked to him more, where he could hear me and understand me. The last day we were there, we were all in the kitchen kind of wrapping up before we left to fly home. And he said in front of everybody, well, how's your mom doing? And this is the first time he had ever acknowledged my mom. And I said, well, we're not really doing great. And he's like, well, health-wise, how is she doing? I said, well, she's doing well. Yeah, nothing to complain about. And he said, well, that's good. And then he said, have you decided what you want to call me yet? And I said, is there something you want me to call you? And he said, I'm agreeable.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't know, like, it sounded like he was reaching out, like, are you going to call me dad?
Mm-hmm. Which is like a thing we all kind of struggle with, of like, I don't know what to call you. Yeah. Am I going to call you Jeff, dad? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I had called him Jeff up to this point. So I just said, I don't know. And we just left it at that. And then we were walking out the door saying goodbyes, and my whole family walked in front of me. And then I walked out. He actually walked out with me, which I didn't even realize. He was like right behind me. And I'm about to walk off that final porch step, walking to the car. And he pulled me back and was like, we were forehead to forehead, like our noses were almost touching. And he said, "Thank you for being a good person." And I didn't expect him to do any of that because he had been so non-emotional the entire 4 days we had been with them. And I said, "Well, thank you for not being a jerk." And then he said, "No, I'm not a jerk." And I was like, why did I say that? It just came out.
Yeah.
And then he hugged me, this big, long hug. And I felt like that was the hug I was waiting for. Mm-hmm. And I think it had to be when nobody else was around. Mm. So I felt like that he needed to know I was a normal person, decent person to begin with. And then he just didn't want an audience, probably. And wow. I felt like that's what I really needed, was the embrace. And then I actually pulled away first. And then he pulled me back again and kept hugging. And then when I pulled away again, I looked at him, and I don't know if I'm making it up in my mind, and I saw tears, or if there were really tears there, but in my head, there were tears.
Oh, wow.
So then I felt like, okay, I do mean something to him. Mm-hmm. Which I felt like the whole first couple of days there, he could care less. It was like a neighbor visiting for dinner.
Yeah. Well, so, and I mean, I'm sure, not to make excuses for him, but it's the shock of it all. And then here you are, and right. Then the dementia element as well probably right. factors in. Right. I'm so glad that you got that good, long, yes. I'm your father recognition right. and acknowledgement.
Me too. That's what I really needed. From that moment, I felt like a calmness had come over me. It was what I needed in this whole process. Because, that whole first, I'd say, year, you're in shock.
Oh, yeah.
You're in absolute shock. And that calmed my nerves. It made me feel better in so many ways. And I felt at peace with everything that had happened.
What was your relationship like after that visit?
So we started talking probably once a week. A week after I got back, I'd been thinking about it a lot, and I'm like, he is my dad. I should call him dad. It felt right. I don't have a dad figure in my life, so it's not like I'm replacing a dad in my life. So I felt like I was ready to call him dad. And he goes, "So I can tell people I have another daughter?" Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "And I didn't even have to change your diaper?" I said, "No, but it was really my teenage years that would have caused you a lot of problems."
Oh,
and he said, "Okay, well, I locked myself out of the car, so I need to figure out how to get back into it." And that's when I was like, yeah, I am related to him, because that's something I would have done too. So.
Oh, wow. And do you still talk regularly?
Yeah. We go up there every summer. The first summer, it's so funny with COVID. During that first visit that winter, we did end up meeting Carrie and her husband, Marcus, on I think it was day 3. And we spent a whole afternoon with them. And then the next morning, Carrie tested positive for COVID. So I saw her that afternoon, and then we didn't see them or their kids anymore. Like, she came and picked up her kids. And then that next summer, I planned a trip out there, just me and the kids, and we were going to stay with them for the first time. And we get there. We have a busy first day. We go to the lake. We do all these things together. We had a really good time just getting to know each other. And the kids were hanging out with, their cousins. And my youngest, she got a fever. And I actually had COVID tests that I just threw in my bag just in case. And I was like, I'll just test her just in case, because I don't want to be around them if we have it. They had never gotten it. She tested positive right away.
Oh my gosh.
So that was our first day there. So I told Mary that night, I was like, if you want us to leave, we'll leave. And she said, yeah, you should probably leave. But then also, I'm not her daughter. Maybe this is me being selfish and being just wanting something that's not there. But I feel like for her own kids, she would have been like, stay here. I'll cook for you. I'll, you know. So I was kind of like, I kind of wanted her to be like, no, stay here. We'll keep you guys in the bedroom and we'll make sure you're okay. And then I got it, of course, for my second time. So COVID happened and cut our visit short. The next time we saw them, they actually came out to Arizona for my son's bar mitzvah, which was January of 2023. And I sent them the invitation, and immediately they said, we probably won't be able to make it. Mary told me the last time they flew on an airplane was for their honeymoon in 1985 or something like that. And they went to California. So she's like, we probably won't make it to David's bar mitzvah. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I like wanted them to make an effort, but I was like, it's fine. And then all of a sudden I get an alert that they signed up to come, like online. Like they didn't even tell me. And I was like, what? And so I texted her. I was like, are you guys coming? And she's like, yep, we're coming. So all of them came.
Both sisters.
So
and everyone.
Yeah, and like Carrie's husband and their two kids, like they all came. Her kids, that was their first airplane ride ever, because they also live, like they all live out in the middle of nowhere. They don't fly on airplanes. They don't travel. It was pretty amazing. It was just such a busy time because we had so many people coming out of town from so many places. But I made like the day before the bar mitzvah, I had them all over at my house and made food and all this stuff. So it was a lot of work, but it was worth it. And they got to see where we live. And I don't know if they'll ever come out again. So it was kind of exciting to have them here. And I know how much of a big deal that was. So they've really opened up and allowed us in.
It's amazing that you're able to recognize that, like that was a big deal for them to come out and mean something, that they got on a plane and came to see you. Wow. So did you see them this summer as well?
Yep. So then this summer 2023, we stayed out there. We stayed with them. I can't believe it. I didn't even think ahead of time. I was just like, we'll be here from this date to this date. And Mary's like, you're going to stay with us for a month? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. Is that okay? And she loved it. I think she's kind of lonely because he has dementia. Like, it's hard for him to have a conversation. He needs help getting dressed now. This has all changed so much since I first met him. So I think she enjoys the company, and she really, I think she really likes being with us all.
That's
like,
so
it gives her something to do in the summer. And she's retired since we first met them. So she has her summers free. So we stayed with them for almost a month. And we just did a lot of fun stuff all over together. And I just keep thinking I want to create these memories with them. And I really do enjoy being part of the family. It's hard because we didn't grow up together. So I sometimes feel like I still have to be on my best behavior because I have more to lose than the other sisters have to lose. Like, they could easily cut me out of their lives forever because I don't agree with something, or I'm not okay with something they want to do. And the other sisters can act up and say what they want, all they want, and they will always have their parents there. Do you know what I mean by that?
Totally.
I have to be on my best behavior.
Yeah.
Right. I have a different relationship. I came in after, and it's almost like I'm not the blood sister, although I am blood.
You are.
So,
yeah. So that kind of goes into one of the questions I had as a follow-up. When we last spoke, you were kind of struggling with the lost time. And, you mentioned how he was athletic and he coached all their sports and he was super involved, and you're like that too. And have you been able to kind of come to terms with that, or is that still something that you think about?
I did think about it a lot more than I do now. I'm still, like, when I go to their house is like frozen in the 1990s. Every picture they ever took with their kids from, being born till senior pictures are still covered. They cover the walls all over their house. And when I stay there, I stay in Carrie's old room that literally has been frozen in time as well. Like, it's the same as it was her senior year of high school. So I see pictures of her everywhere, and her friends, and her family pictures, and her cousins, which are my cousins. And I'm not in any of them. There's family pictures all over the walls. And the first time I stayed there, I had a really hard time looking at them. And even my youngest, who was 9 at the time, she goes, "Mom, you should really be in these pictures." And I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know, but they didn't know me. And it like sometimes kills me inside because he still talks about that. "Oh, Kelly had the best arm." And I want to be like, "You should have seen me." And I will never say that because it's really not that important in the grand scheme of life.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Yeah, being in their house reminds me of that over and over and over again. But now I'm at the point where I don't get these old stories from him anymore because of the dementia. And I'm okay with that. And I just want to move forward. That first year, though, all the emotions of mad, angry, sad, like over and over and over. And it's so cyclical. And I still get those. I still get those feelings. But I'm just at a point where I just want to move forward now and form new memories together. Carrie has actually come around. It wasn't until this last summer. So we just got back from there a couple weeks ago. And we just stayed with them a week this year. And Carrie has grown on me. The sister that I never thought would have grown on me.
Yeah, sometimes it takes time.
And we actually, it takes time. And Kelly, the other sister, told me that she had never seen their dad cry until he had to tell Carrie that I was actually his daughter as well, which made me really upset to learn. I'm like, my pure existence made her that upset, and him as well, to tell her that. She went from that was 2021, to now we get along. We actually have fun together. I'm actually a lot more like her than I ever thought I was. Like, I never thought I'd have any sort of relationship with her.
Wow.
But I just gave her time and I didn't push it. I'm like, if she doesn't want me in her life, I'm not going to be in her life. It's not something I need. But she came around slowly. And I really like her husband. He's super nice. And their kids and our kids get along really well. So it's all worked out. And it's all a developing story.
Yeah. Yeah.
It will forever.
For sure.
Forever be a developing story. Mm-hmm.
Last time we talked, you had not yet told your birth certificate dad. He had texted you back. He didn't call you, and you just left it. Have you talked to him and told him since?
Yeah. Just a little recap. He had reached out to me, and I was going up there in October before I got COVID, and said, "I'd like to meet with you." And he said, "Serious, huh?" And that's literally like his text, "Serious, huh?" ? And I said, "Yes." And he never responded. And fast forward till St. Patrick's Day, it was the day of the Taylor Swift concert in Phoenix. What day was that? It was last summer. So 2023. So we're talking 2 years.
Yeah.
Almost a full 2 years. He said, "Happy St. Patty's Day. You're half Irish, which makes my grandkids 25%. So he clearly still doesn't know.
Oh, wow.
Because I've told, like, his brother knows. I'm close with his brother, my uncle, and they have 3 kids, my cousins, that I'm actually not related to, but I've grown up with them. And they don't talk. Like, my birth certificate dad has really cut all of his family out of his life, so he doesn't even talk to them anymore. And so I just wrote back, "Happy St. Patty's Day." That's all I wrote. And then he never wrote back. And my birthday was a couple of days after that, and he didn't even reach out. Like, he hasn't since I was 13. He hasn't wished me a happy birthday. So it was nothing new. He is just one of those dads that when it's convenient for him, he'll show up. But I don't bank on it. And at this point, I don't feel like he deserves to know because he's not even in my life. And even if I could have had cancer. Like, I could have been dying and he just ghosted me. So I'm like, you know what? That shows me that even need to tell him.
And that's a great point. He didn't know what you were texting about and didn't show up. So,
no.
Yeah.
I tried to tell him and he didn't. He ignored me. I'm kind of done with that whole situation. My sister I grew up with, who that is her biological dad, she keeps telling me I need to tell him. And I just tell her, he won't even give me the time of day. Even if I wanted to tell him, I don't even know how I would unless I just send it in a text message. And I'm not going to do that. I would never tell that to anyone over text. Even though he's so separated from me, I think it would still be a crappy way to do it.
How are things going with your mom? I think when we last spoke, things were kind of getting better. She had finally sort of acknowledged it a little bit. So where are you at now?
We keep it pretty separate. I didn't talk to her for the whole month after I found out. Then it was sporadic, and I just reached out to her when I wanted information because I wasn't getting any information from the family at that point. Now I just live my life. I go see who I want to see, and I don't really talk to her about it. It's just like an unspoken thing between us. It makes her feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I'll say, like, she'll be like, where are you going when you come? And I'll say, oh, I'm going to the cabin with the family. And she'll say, oh, whose cabin? Or ask me questions. And she'll be like, okay. And she'll just drop it.
Okay.
Her husband, on the other hand, he's like so inquisitive. Like he wants to know so many things. He's really into the nature versus nurture thing. And that kind of bothers me a little bit. It's like, it feels nosy, and it's like, feels like a science experiment at that point when he's like, so do you have more things in common with those sisters or this sister? And, oh, I'm just so interested in the nature versus nurture. And I'm just like, but this is my real life. You know, it makes it feel like a science experiment. And I don't like that.
I was just going to say, so it's not an experiment. Yeah.
Right. There's real feelings involved by so many, it affects so many people. It does.
Yeah.
So that's where we are with my mom. So she'll hear more when her husband asks me questions and she's around. And I know she wants to know everything, but she's acts like she doesn't. So it's just kind of awkward for both of us. And it's kind of like I'm in two very separate families. And since my parents that I grew up with divorced, I was kind of used to keeping them compartmentalized where, you know, I wouldn't talk about what I did with this family. And then my birth certificate dad, like, you know, left and so I didn't see him anymore. So then I was just with my mom, but now it's like, I'm back to this. It's sometimes hard to go from one family to the next in my head. It's like a mind shift. Like I'm with this family and I don't talk about my mom. And then I go to this family and then I don't talk about my dad. And
just completely compartmentalized. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I tell my kids, like, they talk about it freely and I want them to. I don't want them to have to think like they can't. So they call them grandma and grandpa. And that kind of took a couple years for my older kids. My youngest one, right away, she was like, oh, grandma and grandpa. Okay. Like it just clicked. My older two are like Mary, Jeff. And now this summer, for the first time, I heard them say grandma and grandpa. And so it's just all new, but it's getting more familiar.
I'm reflecting. You're the third person I've spoken to now with an update, kind of where we all seem to land. Mm-hmm. And it's like there's this element of acceptance around the distance that's just always going to be there on both sides. We're never going to talk about it with our moms in depth. And we are building these relationships, but we also kind of have to accept that the lost time is lost. There may not be the depth of connection that you have with someone that you grow up with. And It's really interesting. And I was just reflecting that, like, I don't think a lot of people are talking about this part of it. We all talk about when it first happens. We don't talk about it 3 years later, 5 years later, whatever.
Right. I think people that don't experience it think of this fairy tale or soap opera where you meet your dad and then he's your dad. He does these dad things with you. Well, I haven't really had a dad since I'm 13, so I don't even really know what that feels like, to tell you the truth. But I feel like at this point, I don't need a dad. I'll call, but it sometimes is a month before I call because I have 3 kids and I'm busy and I'm running here and there and doing things. And Mary's like, haven't heard from you in a while. Her kids, she talks to almost every day. You don't know how to fit into a family you've never belonged to before. Like, we're new, we're just being inserted into this brand new family, and we grew up differently. We grew up with different parents even. We grew up in different towns, cities, states. We had different life experiences. I went to college at a big, giant school in Colorado outside of Minnesota, and I lived in Spain, and I traveled the world, and I don't think they've ever left the United States. We're so different, and we're trying to blend, and it's working the best it can.
And am I correct that you are a different religion and everything from them? Because you mentioned your son had a bar mitzvah. And
yeah, I'm Jewish. They're Christian, small town Christian.
Yeah. Different, definitely different.
And we don't eat pork and we don't eat shellfish. We keep kosher to a certain degree. And they'll like want to pray before dinner in Jesus's name. And we're just like, okay. Which is fine. Like, pray away and we'll sit there, no problem. But like, I'll pray to God all day long. It's fine. So it's just the differences.
Yeah.
We're family, but we're so different still.
Totally.
It's just a lot to try to fit into a family, conform almost, but I'm never going to conform. It's just, we're just very different. But it's been nice. It's been really nice to get to know them. I'm glad that we now have this summer tradition where we go there every summer and see them. My kids will remember that. I wanted my kids to know where and who they come from, just like I needed to know where I came from. And now I have that. One huge thing, my second summer going there, my dad, now I'm talking about my biological dad, Jeff, his best friend since they were kids, his name's Barry. Mary told me that Barry really wanted to meet us. We met Barry. He's a farmer. I've heard of Barry my whole life because my mom also knew Barry. And we drive out to Barry's farm. He has thousands of acres of land. And we go out to his farm. We had to drive all around this farm to find him. And we finally find him and we meet him. It was all great. And he said to me, he's like, come in my car. Do you want your kids and your husband to come too, or do they want to drive separate? And I was like, oh, I'll go get them. They can come in your truck too. And then he just shut the door and started driving. So I couldn't even like get out of the car. And I was like, oh my gosh, where are we going? So I have my cell phone. I'm texting my husband. I was like, just follow us. Like, I just met this guy. It was just me and him in his truck. And he said, Crystal, if there's anything you want to know, ask me now while we're alone. And I was like, so taken off guard by this. I was like, so did you know my mom? And he said, yep, I've known your mom her whole life. I've known your dad his whole life. He said the hardest day your dad has ever had in his life was the day that your mom married your dad, like my birth certificate dad.
Yeah.
He said, I went to that wedding with your biological dad and held his hand as he cried as your mom walked down the aisle.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Fred Warner, linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers. Abercrombie has the new suits you need, plus all the collared shirts to go with them. The Abercrombie & Fitch Collins suit is the only suit you'll ever need for any occasion. Available in slim, classic, and athletic. Pair with a collared classic. Go with a soft, easy-to-wear sweater polo or a comfortable long-sleeve shirt. With so many different fits and fabrics, you can make a look that's completely your own. Add the Abercrombie & Fitch Collins suit and new collared shirts to every occasion this season. Shop online or in store.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah. So that felt weirdly, and I never shared that with Mary ever, because I don't think that's something she knows or will ever know. But I felt like I was almost validated in a way.
That makes sense.
They knew each other their whole lives, and I was like a piece of both of them. I don't know. It felt like I can't even explain it.
That I hear from the people that I interview is there's a lot of feelings around feeling like they weren't conceived out of love or a relationship that meant something to both of their parents.
Right.
And you found out that it did mean something.
Yeah. I didn't know knowing that would make me feel so good, but it really did. So I was like, wow. Like they really wanted to be together. And then Barry kept talking and he said, when they were seniors in high school, your mom said, Jeff, let's get married and we can take over the newspaper. Jeff, my biological dad's parents had a newspaper, the town newspaper. So we can take over the newspaper business from your parents and we can stay in this town forever. And he said, no, I'm going to college. We can't do that yet. And they did date in college at the beginning. And then my mom met my birth certificate dad, had my sister, and I came along 5 years after that. So she clearly had an affair with him.
There was still
after
feelings.
She was married.
Yeah.
Yeah. And had a child already. So yeah, it was just very validating to hear that. So I was so happy to meet Barry. And he knows that his best friend has dementia, my dad, and he has reached out to me. He calls me. He tells my husband, thanks for taking care of Crystal. And it's just really sweet. It can be like a lonely process to have even this far down the road. It's still something you think about it, as I'm sure you can relate to. You think about it all the time, and it can be kind of lonely sometimes because you can't stop thinking about that even now. And it's just something that's part of you, something you had to learn to adapt to and will always be a part of your story. To kind of heal from everything and process everything I had been going through. I wrote a book and let me see, I have it sitting here because I wanted to remember all the feelings I felt when I first found out. And it's single-spaced 80 pages and like size 11 font. When I look at it, I'm like, I can't believe I wrote this many words. But it was so healing.
Is it up to write? Is it for sale or anything, or is it just for you?
No, it's really just for me. And some of my close friends have read it. My husband read it. He was the first one to read it. And it's so nerve-wracking to have the person closest to you read your thoughts and your, like, everything that was going on in my head, as crazy as I felt like I was, like, to have him know, like, yep, that's your crazy wife. But he couldn't put it down. He stayed up all night reading it. And he's not a reader either. And he's like, this was so good, I couldn't put it down. He's like, you could make a movie out of your life. Like, that's not necessarily a good thing. I had a playlist that I made over that first probably 6 months of all the songs that I could relate to, that I listened to over and over, that calmed me down. And I have my whole playlist in it. And so I eventually thought it would be helpful to have for other people going through it. I don't think I'm ready to release it or anything quite yet. The day after I found out, I spent the entire next day sitting at the computer and writing out everything, every detail of what happened, because I never wanted to forget it. So that's how it started. And then every day I kept writing, and I would write another, 10 pages. And it's not all emotions and feelings, but and a lot of it is flashbacks to when I remembered things in my childhood that could have been a giveaway. Like, everything comes back to like, oh my gosh, I remember my mom talking about this boyfriend she had and named Jeff. Like, all these things came back.
That's so great that you documented all of that. And if you do ever end up releasing it, please let me know and I'll be sure to share it, because I just think the more resources that are out there for people, the better.
Right. Well, that's what my husband was like. This could help so many people going through this. And there's people finding out every day. And it is so hard because, like you said, there are no resources. Like your podcast, for example. This podcast wasn't around when I found out, but that would have been where I would have listened to other people's stories, because you feel so alone. Like, has this happened to anybody else? And then you find that Facebook group. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's a whole Facebook group full of people that have had DNA surprises. At first, the only people I could relate to were people that were adopted, but we have a different story completely.
It is different. I mean, there's definitely overlap. There's intersection with the adoption community. But you're right, that element of shock. And some adoptees have it when they take a test or they're late discovery, but the shock is acute.
Yeah.
And it is a unique experience for sure.
Yeah. Because you also have the betrayal of who kept the secret from you when it comes from the closest person to you as a child, your mother, and knowing they've lied to you your entire life. Like, that's a whole nother trauma in itself.
Yeah.
And a lot of things I wrote about, like my mom has a big part in this. And I've found out through this process that she is a narcissist. And I didn't recognize it before. But she even told my husband not that long ago that I'm just really sensitive. It's me. I'm the problem. I don't think she will ever recognize being the person in the wrong in this whole situation. And I've come to terms with that, and that's okay.
Yeah, that radical acceptance. We have to have it to move through. We have to.
Yeah, or you don't move on. And that writing this, like, you can tell from the beginning my raw emotion and how I've come to terms with it at the end. So it was seriously like a year writing, because I didn't work for a long time because I just couldn't. I was just a shell of a person. I wasn't working. I was writing. I was writing this novel.
You weren't working, but you were doing the work. Yeah.
Right. And I felt like if I hadn't ever put in that work, that I wouldn't have been to this stage of the process yet. So I feel really good about where I've come. And I think a lot of that is because I did this. I wrote it all down, and it felt so good coming out.
That's great advice for anyone listening. To write it down, write how you feel, tell your story. If you could tell Crystal of 2.5 years ago anything, what would you tell her knowing what you know now?
Well, I listened to the first podcast because I couldn't remember what we had even talked about. It had been so long. And I almost teared up at certain parts because I'm going to tear up now, actually. It was so raw. And no matter how many times you tell the story, it's a lot to go through. But that being said, after that first year, the first year it's a lot. It's rough. Especially that first 6 months, there are more bad days than good days. You go into so many different modes, like stalker mode, like looking for pictures. Do you see resemblances? There's just so much you go through that nobody else understands unless they have gone through it. And I'd say after that first year, you make it out of that like tunnel vision of always it consuming you at all times. So I would say make it through that year and you will have good vision again. I feel like a lucky one of the lucky ones that actually gets to have a relationship. But like all families, it's not all perfect and it's not all roses every day. And like I started touching on, like it can be lonely sometimes because nobody else that I hang out with in my daily activities, nobody else knows what is consuming my brain sometimes. And sometimes it does. I just start thinking about everything I've been through. And even, like I said, listening to my podcast of 2.5 years ago, I'm like, wow, I went through so much. But like I said, it is a part of me. It's a part of my story. It makes me who I am. And I now know where I came from. And my kids know where they came from. So I wouldn't change a thing. I'm glad I found out. That's a question I get from some people. Yeah. Do you think you would do that DNA test again? Absolutely. Everyone deserves to know where they came from.
Yes.
And nobody deserves to be lied to about it.
No.
So what would I say to myself? You're going to go through a lot, but at the end, you're going to find clarity.
Thank you for sharing that. Crystal, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. And I just really want to thank you. You were one of the first people that I spoke to after my own DNA surprise. And when I put out this call in a Facebook group saying, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. Would anybody talk to me? You signed up not knowing what this would turn into or who I was or anything about me. And you put trust in me with your story and to put it out there. And I just can't thank you enough. And my July NPE twin, I'm right there along with you. So thank you.
Oh, of course.
Thanks again to Crystal for sharing an update with us. If you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, please submit your story at dnasurprises.com. And remember, you can join me over on Patreon for early access to ad-free episodes at patreon.com/DNA surprises. Until next time, this episode of DNA Surprises was hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auerselt. It was mixed and mastered by Josh Auerselt of Siren Recording Studios.